Welcome to Caregiver Chats. I'm Dr. Lakelyn. Today, we'll be kicking off a 3-part series about caregiving relationships with a discussion about caring for an aging parent. So stay tuned and we'll get into it. Caregiver Chats is a podcast designed to help those caring for older adults find balance, support, resources, and encouragement. If you're caring for an aging family member or friend, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Dr. Lakelyn. I'm a gerontologist and caregiving advocate for Home Instead, an honor company. I know how busy caregivers are, and I'm so grateful that you are taking the time to listen. In our last episode, I outlined the top 10 resources that every caregiver should know. If you haven't had a chance to go back and listen, I encourage you to do so. But today, I'm really looking forward to kicking off a 3-part series about various caregiving relationships. We're starting out with caring for an aging parent, and then the next 2 episodes will cover caring for a spouse, and then we'll talk about caring for a relative that might not be your spouse, might not be your parent. There's a lot of other kind of caregiving relationships out there. But before I introduce my guest, let's talk a little bit about the prevalence of these various caregiving relationships. If we look at the data from the National Alliance for Caregiving's Caregiving in the U.S. 2020 study, we know that the majority of those caring for someone 50 and older take care of a relative. That's 89% of people are taking care of a relative, while just 11% are caring for a friend, neighbor, or non-relative. And then if you kind of break that big statistic down a little bit, over half, 57% are caring for a parent or parent-in-law. 11% are caring for a spouse or partner. 5% are caring for a sibling or sibling-in-law. And about 1% are caring for an adult child. And then there's 5% that are caring for another type of relative. So that could be, an aunt or a cousin. No matter what the relationship that you have is with the person that you're caring for, there's likely going to be changes in the relationship dynamic and various challenges that are faced. So today, again, we're zeroing in on that most common caregiving relationship, caring for an aging parent. And this can be tricky to navigate for some people because you're caring for someone who cared for you, who raised you. And so, again, that can kind of create some interesting family dynamics and some challenges. And I am excited to have a guest joining me today, Jenny Munro. Jenny is a fellow gerontologist and family caregiver. Jenny helped care for her mom, who lived with Alzheimer's disease for 13 years, and she's now helping to care for her dad. So welcome, Jenny. Hi, it's so fun to have you here.
Hi, Lakelyn. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your story and just talking with you about some of the challenges, the family dynamics that you faced in caring for not only one of your parents, but now you're caring for a second parent. So
yes.
I thought it'd be great for you to maybe just tell us your story. What is your caregiving story?
Well, yes, it's been quite a journey. It first started with my mom, who you said she lived with Alzheimer's for 13 years, and she was the one that we took care of along with providing respite care for my dad. It was a different journey with her. We really helped out my dad a lot of ways in the home by providing meals for the two of them, providing some cleaning around the house, taking them to their appointments, doing the grocery shopping, and then personal care for my mom. As her disease progressed, Dad needed more respite care since he was her primary caregiver. And we realized that with him and his emotions, that took a toll on him. And then for my mom, as the disease progressed, it was more and more hands-on care with her. But then we had the opportunity to have home care come in and help us so we could be, the daughters and the sons that she has. And also be there more for my dad. So she passed away 2 years ago of Alzheimer's, and last December my dad took a fall. Since her passing, he's been home alone. He's 97 years old and lives in his own home, and he's been really independent until December. Cognitively, he's as sharp as can be, but his body's really starting to wear down, and he's very frail. One morning, he went up to wake up, and he fell, and he lied on his floor for about 8 hours till my brother came to see him. And so since then, we have been with him 24/7. I'm the youngest of 9 kids, so we have a lot of help, fortunately. I don't know what we would do if, I was an only child, because it takes a lot of people. Since then, he's been on hospice since December. We have home care, and then all of us kids are doing 24/7 with them. So it's a different role than it was for my mom, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, first, I'm sorry to hear about your mom's passing.
Thanks.
I know that watching someone progress through Alzheimer's disease is not easy.
It's
on
hard.
So many levels.
Yes. Yeah. You see them so healthy and vibrant and alive, and to, at the end, they just, no communication at all, not knowing who you are and not being able to have those talks and that relationship you used to have.
I bet. Yeah. Well, and then to watch your dad be kind of the primary caregiver and support.
Yes.
And then now you're caring for your dad.
Oh, yeah.
You've just had kind of a variety of roles
yes.
that you've played over the last maybe decade or so.
Yeah, right. We have. And the 24/7 has been an eye-opener. It's really hard work. Yeah. And again, like I said, we have home care coming in to give us the respite care, because we stay with them for a week at a time. And you get those different emotions and challenges that we didn't have while mom was alive, because we would go in and stop for 2 hours and leave, and then someone else would come the next day. We kind of were rotating days on who would come, and going from 2 to 3 hours in one day to 24/7, 7 days a week, it's a complete difference. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure so many people listening can identify with one or part or all of your story, because again, this is the most common type of caregiving situation. And I know also in your role at Home Instead, you talk every single day with adult children who are calling in, inquiring about services for their aging parent.
Yes.
And so I know that not only are you living this, but you're talking with people every single day about this experience.
Yes. And so many of them I talk to live out of town. For us and my family, there's 4 of us that live in Omaha. And then I have siblings that come in from Kansas, from St. Louis, California, New Jersey to spend their week with dad. So again, we're so blessed to have a big family and the ability to care for him and have him remain in his home and age, where so many people don't have that. Yeah. And they don't know their options, because they may be doing this themselves, or their mother lives with their dad who is aging and he can't do it alone. So again, we're very grateful for having a big family and being able to do this for my dad.
So Jenny, you've touched on this already a little bit, but I want to kind of walk through some of the experience and dive a little deeper into some things that, I see commonly happen for family caregivers. And one big one is that change in the role. So you go from being an adult daughter to a caregiver. And so what is that like? Tell me a little bit more about that role change and how it maybe differed from one parent to another, and just the impacts that it's had.
It did differ from one parent to another. For my mom, it was a real gradual changing role. Since she lived with the disease for 13 years, we saw the changes gradually, and it was hard. But with my dad, at the time that my dad was her primary caregiver, it gave me and my siblings the time to fill in those gaps to care for her. Like I said earlier, we helped with meals. We would take her to appointments. We would also provide her with personal care towards the end of her life. But for my dad, it was a sudden change. And I don't think any of us were quite ready. He has lived such a healthy life and a long life. And like I said, his cognition, he's so sharp. But that one day in 24 hours, he changed from living independently to relying on us 24/7. So it was a quick change. He was, living independently in his home, in his own home, and the next day he fell and was completely dependent on our care. So my siblings and I have been providing him with that care, along with hospice and along with home care, and just doing the best that we can to support him.
Yeah. Well, and I know that, when you're caring for someone, there's just, those moments, like you mentioned, like personal care for your mom. That definitely, for a lot of people, is kind of a challenging role to take on. A lot of people aren't comfortable with that. I mean, it's one thing to go over and bring a meal or, interact, engage them in an activity or take them for an outing, but it's another thing to kind of provide that hands-on care.
Yes.
And so, would you mind sharing a little bit about that and how that kind of dynamic shifted in the relationship?
You bet. Yeah. For personal care, it was really difficult with my mom. Because my sister and I, more so my sister, would provide the personal care. She would just get really upset. She hated to get into the shower. She would be cold. It was almost like we had to talk to her like a child, like, Mom, we're not going to hurt you. You're okay. This is going to be fine. You're going to feel so much better afterwards. Now let's go in together. And we just really have to talk her through that personal care. With my dad, his cognition is fine, and he just doesn't care. He's just like, let's go and get it done, So I'm sure the Alzheimer's had some impact on the way her behavior was versus my dad, but it did. It was a role change for us as their children and providing them with that hands-on, especially the personal care was challenging.
Yeah, and that's something that, we hear often, and sometimes a reason why families look into home care is because they're like, okay, I don't want to do this hands-on care. I don't feel comfortable. Or maybe it's a son caring for his mom or a daughter caring for father, and just want to kind of find somebody else to help with that kind of an activity. Because it can be challenging. Those are very kind of intimate moments that you might not expect to have to be in.
Right.
But like you said, things can change overnight. In one of my earlier podcasts, we talked about the various trajectories of caregiving. There's that kind of caregiver creep, as we call it. Sounds like kind of like with your mom. As her dementia progressed, you eased kind of into that caregiving role. But with your dad, it was kind of a crisis situation. Fell, which is another very common thing that we see. And, and overnight, you all had to kind of go into caregiving mode. And just kind of figure it out.
We did, yes. Yeah, it was just so quick. And like I said, he was so healthy and independent to that night, spending the night with him, the first time in how many years, and just the problems he was having throughout the night. And that, got us to call and our home care provider and get help with them, call hospice, and then get the support that we needed outside of the home.
Yeah. It does take a lot of people. And,
it does.
Like you mentioned, you feel so lucky that you have a lot of people, but there are some that maybe are an only child or maybe the only sibling that's willing to step up and help. And so in those situations, that can be really challenging. There can be a lot of mixed emotions in that. And so talk to me about the emotional side of caregiving, because I know that it can be such a roller coaster of emotions. And you're not only, in your situation, and you're caring for your dad, but then you have all these siblings. And so just what are some of the emotions that you've gone through over this last decade?
Yes. Well, I would say with my mom, my emotions were more sadness. Since she lived with Alzheimer's for so long, I saw those changes over the course of the years and how hard it was for her. She was smart, she was funny, she was hardworking, she had a lot of friends, and towards the end of her life, the disease really took her over. The friends quit calling less or stopping by. The communication really ceased. And it was just seeing her decline and the disease progressing was very sad for me to see. For my dad, my emotions have been more of being tired, feeling a little isolated when I'm alone with him at his house. And I would say just, more stress when caring for him, and providing that 24/7 care brings on, for me, it was more different emotions than I had for my dad. Because again, I think that 24/7 care and living with him, even for 5 to 7 days, it just wears on you, and it is stressful because you are taken out of your own comfort level in your own home. You're sleeping in a different bed. He calls, we run. When he's ready for lunch, I have to serve it. It's just a lot more caring for him and the stress and the exhaustion that takes on.
Wow. Yeah, there's just so many emotions wrapped up in it. And it kind of like bleeds into the physical aspects of caregiving.
Yes.
So not only are you're just physically tired, which then impacts your mental health and well-being and just all of that kind of, I don't want to say creates a perfect storm because there's ways you can manage your emotions, but I'm sure it can be overwhelming.
It does. And I'll never forget the first time my mom fell out of bed. My brother and I went over there, and my brother is young, 59, 60 now. But he's a healthy guy. And it took the two of us to pick her up off the floor. She weighs like 120 pounds, and he threw his back out.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. And then I threw my back out helping my dad week 1. I couldn't believe it. And I feel like I'm a healthy person, and I put the gait belt on him, and it was towards the end of the day. And I'm like, I was getting tired. I was kind of cranky. And I'm like, come on, I'm pulling him up. And just threw my back out. It was out for a couple days. So physically, yes. And he's a small man too. He weighs about 116 pounds. Wow. And so just different movements, the stress, you're tired. It does start to wear on you. And my siblings and I range from 69 to 56 years old. So half of them are grandparents, and now we're taking care of grandpa, great grandpa. So it does get physically draining.
Wow. Yeah. We talk, or I've talked about some of the challenges of caregiving, and, there's like the emotional side of it. There's the physical challenges of caregiving, but then, there's also family dynamics. I think that's one we haven't really touched on yet. And I'm sure with 9 siblings, it sounds like you all get along pretty well, but I'm sure there's been, moments.
There's been moments
where
sure.
there's maybe some tension. So what's it like to kind of navigate those various family dynamics?
Yeah, there's definitely been some good stories, and we all seem to be kind of bossy. So I'm the youngest of the 9. My oldest brother is 13 years older than me. There's 6 girls and 3 boys. And as I said, 4 of us live in Omaha. But to be honest, we do all get along. And my mom used to always say, I'm so glad you kids all get along and like each other. We might have our arguments, but for the most part, yes, we have all come together and want to do our part and honor our dad's wishes is to stay and remain in his own home. And, some of the dynamics, again, go back to, who's coming this week, putting the schedule together on who can come what weeks, who can relieve on the weekends, and getting that schedule in line with everybody. Fortunately, we've been able to have respite care and bring on Home Instead actually to provide us all with respite care. But yeah, the dynamics have really been going well, and everybody has really stepped up and has done their part to contribute to the care for my dad.
That's really wonderful.
Yeah, really lucky.
You are. Yeah, it's very lucky. You hear of, caregiving either brings families together or it can pull families apart. And in those, scenarios where it's pulling families apart, it's heartbreaking. And,
yeah, it is.
I know you and I both, when we interact with caregivers, we hear kind of those heartbreaking stories. I have siblings, but no one will help. And, there's, I think sometimes you have to kind of assess what everyone's willing and able to do. Because like you said, your siblings range in age, maybe range in physical abilities. Yeah. Maybe they have various financial situations.
Right,
so it's so important to kind of take inventory. Okay, who's all available? Yeah. Who's willing to do what? Because there might be family members that aren't comfortable with bathing. Right. But might be just fine, with transportation. Or maybe some of the grandkids could step in and help with that transportation. We have a group in our family called Grandma's Drivers. It's a text group. And so this last week, my aunt sent out a text like, who can take Grandma to the,
I love that.
the eye doctor? And I was like, I'll take her. And we just had a great time. It sounds kind of silly, like at the eye doctor, but
no, not at all.
It does take the whole family
it
to kind of
does
chip in. And if you can find people's kind of strong points or strengths and kind of lean into that can sometimes help
definitely
to get other people involved. let them help in areas that they feel really good about. And then maybe you slip a few other asks in there, but it can be a really good place to start.
And we're fortunate. None of us really are that sandwich generation where we're still raising our own kids. I have one sister that lives out of town, and her youngest is in high school. So yeah, she has different commitments than the other 8 of us, who our kids are all grown and out of the house. So we are fortunate in that way where I don't have to take care of dad and then go home and take care of my own kids. He's grown, he's out of the house. And so that makes a big difference too, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you also work, Jenny, but I just want to take a moment to pause quickly.
Sure.
We're going to hear a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Home Instead, an honor company. If you find yourself needing extra support as a family caregiver or time away from your caregiving responsibilities, Home Instead can help. Our home care services are delivered by compassionate care professionals and range from personal care, meal preparation, and medication management to Alzheimer's care and hospice support. Visit homeinstead.com to learn more and to find a location near you. Okay, so Jenny, I know that you work while doing all of this caregiving. And so there's a lot of family caregivers out there who also work, maybe full-time, part-time. So talk a little bit about managing that, caring for your parent while also working.
Yeah. So when I have my week with my dad, I am fortunate enough to be able to work at his house. So instead of working at home, I'm working at his home. So that allows me to have my week of care for him. I also do most of all the scheduling since we have Home Instead. I have that connection, and it's easier for me to manage when we need the caregivers. We manage the scheduling for the hospice, for home care, for siblings. But everybody, again, is really gracious and helpful. And so for me, just that 1 week out of the month that I have to work at my dad's, I don't think it's not as challenging as one might think it is, because I do have the opportunity to work at his home, and I have the flexibility for my employer to do that. So I've been grateful for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And not everyone has that flexibility, but I think the pandemic has really opened up employers' kind of minds to how people can work and then creating that work-life balance. And so I know that family caregivers have talked about how that's super important. And also we're seeing, more employers have caregiving friendly policies and that sort of thing. And so I think that has been really great for family caregivers. And some are, changing careers to jobs that are more flexible.
I agree.
For that reason.
No doubt. Yeah.
And so, you're working, you're caregiving, but you also have outside support and resources.
Yes.
And you've talked about that already, Jenny, but I know there might be some family caregivers that are listening and you're like, oh, I feel like I'm in a very similar situation to Jenny and her family. They're probably wondering, what resources did you tap into? So
sure.
I know it might be different from your mom versus your dad, but would you mind sharing a little bit about those resources?
So for my mom, I went to alz.org. That was my number one resource because I had never met anyone with dementia until my mom had it, And so I learned a lot from that website. I learned about the stages, other additional resources as a family caregiver. I went to that a lot, and I found that very helpful, understanding and learning more about the disease and that some of her behavior, it wasn't mom, it was the disease. And that really was very helpful for me and for my family, who I passed that along to. For my dad, I would say just realizing respite care and how important it is. Anybody out there that is taking care of a family member, really consider respite care options so you can recharge and remain in your caregiving role, because it's so important. It could be 1 hour. My dad doesn't have to be, someone doesn't have to be with him 24/7. So even after I'm done with work, I will get my tennis shoes on and I'm like, Dad, I need 30 minutes. I'll be back in 30 minutes. I go for a walk, and just the fresh air and getting some exercise and out of the house is so important. I come back and I'm like, woohoo, all right, what do you want to do? You know? Yeah. So fortunately, with my mom, I wouldn't be able to do that. But with my dad, you know, respite care can be going outside and getting fresh air and just going around the block if you can, or you know, if you have the siblings or a neighbor or someone that can provide you with 30 minutes, it's better than nothing. Right. And so I really encourage that respite care for anybody, whether you're taking care of someone 24/7 or, you know, 8 hours a day. You know, give yourself that break and time to recharge.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I like how you talked about how respite can take different forms.
Yes.
You know, you could hire professionals like a home instead for respite, but you could also look into, you know, is there a neighbor, is there a friend or another family member that can come over for an hour, 2 hours while you get out, and that time away for yourself, it can look different for everyone.
Definitely.
But yeah, getting fresh air and exercise, especially if it's a beautiful day out, you know, it really can help you know, lighten the mood. And
for sure.
Or if even it's just a sneak away to take like a 30-minute nap.
I know.
Or whatever you need.
Whatever your respite care looks like.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah. And some of my siblings have done that when the caregiver comes over. They're like, don't tell my dad I'm going in the back room and I'm sleeping for 2 hours, because they had a long night. Yeah. And so they don't even want to go outside. They just want sleep. And as we know how important sleep is to recharge, you know. So some of us use that. You know, we might not tell each other that, but they're going in the back bedroom and getting some rest. That's for sure. So that's good.
Those are the secret family dynamics we're not discussing right now.
I won't say which sibling it was.
Well, and I also love that you mentioned ALZ.org, which is the Alzheimer's Association's website. And we'll put that in the show notes for people to check out. A great resource. I mean, educational resources, and learning about whatever your loved one's facing, whether it's falls or Alzheimer's disease or diabetes. You know, so many great resources exist out there. I know on our Home Instead website, we have a care resource section that also has some great resources. So educating yourself
for sure
is a big part, and learning about the resources. And were there any other resources? I feel like when we've chatted in the past, you may have mentioned hospice and maybe Meals on Wheels. So have you utilized any of those types of services too?
Yes. So we have utilized hospice. Right now we have St. Croix here in Omaha that is providing care for my dad and doing a lovely job. We have Home Instead for our respite care, and we have used Meals on Wheels for Dad. Actually, we had Meals on Wheels when Mom was alive, and because we couldn't always prepare the meals. Mom wasn't cooking, of course. So, but since then, we've, you know, when we're there, we can provide him with the meals. So, yes, those resources were all very helpful and useful.
Wonderful. We'll put some links in the show notes so people can learn more about Meals on Wheels. Again, a great resource in, you know, most every community has a Meals on Wheels program. Yeah. So. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing about those various resources. And like you said, it takes kind of a village. It
takes a village for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of resources. And I guess if you were to give kind of a piece of advice to family caregivers to kind of wrap up our discussion when they're caring for an aging parent, what advice would you give them?
Just allow yourself some grace. It's okay to feel sad. The emotions that you go through are real. And, you know, don't deny yourself of respite care. Don't feel guilty about taking it. That's sometimes I talk to people. I feel so guilty. I'm looking for care. I'm like, are you kidding me? You need to take care of yourself physically and mentally. And so you can take care of your loved one. So don't ever feel guilty about getting home care or respite care. You're doing it for yourself, again, so you can take care of your mom or your dad or your loved one. So that's basically what I would say is how important I've learned that respite care is, and utilizing that when you can, and however it looks, use it and take advantage of it when you can.
That's really great advice.
Thanks.
Well, Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure having you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
And thanks for just all that you do to support not only your own dad right now, but the hundreds of family caregivers that I know you're talking to day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Jenny for sharing her story and perspective. I know so many of you listening can likely relate, and you have your own stories of caring for an aging parent. I would love for you to email me with your thoughts, stories, and advice for adult children who are caring for their aging parent. My email is caregiverchats@homeinsteadinc.com. That's homeinsteadinc.com. I also invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Home Instead Inc. That's Home Instead INC. And on those social profiles, you'll find previews for upcoming episodes, caregiving tips, and more. You can also find all of the great resources we talked about today in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and please remember to take good care of yourself while you care for others. Caregiver Chats is brought to you by Home Instead. If you're looking for in-home care to support you on your caregiving journey, please visit homeinstead.com/caregiverchats to learn more.